Hi, it's so good to see you today. This is Deb Antinori. For people who may not have met her before, a creative person in the Brainspotting community and also a trainer and just a senior trainer, I believe. And I'm very happy to have you today to interview you about you and your creative journey for Bone to Brain. And for people who don't know, I am Kristy Snedden. I'm the editor of Bone to Brain Journal. So, to start you off, Deb, what is the origin story of you and your creativity?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your YouTube channel. Really, I think from so early, I was always making things, putting things together. I had a friend up the street that she has a business now called Art and Soul. So we would do creative projects together. And then my mother played piano. My grandmother went to the New England Conservatory of Music. So when I was 6, I said to my mother, I want piano lessons. And she said, well, I can teach you. And I said, no, I want a real teacher. So I went up the street to Mrs. Purrington, and for 10 years, studied piano. At 15, I decided I wanted to be an actress, so I found an acting coach, and then I went to the Boston Conservatory of Music Theater program. So I feel like in all kinds of different ways, there's been creativity in my life, and I was born of very creative folks with my mom, singing and piano and dance, and my dad was a very good dancer as well. They would ballroom dance together, and a mechanical engineer, which there's a lot of creativity, involved in seeing, what's going on with things and making things work. So
I was going to ask you what came first for you, creativity or brain scouting, but I think you just answered that question for us.
yes, unless, as David says, we're all brain spotting all the time. So who knows where those little eyes when I was young were going when I was making things and doing whatever, brain spotting in an informal way. But yeah, the creativity first, I think, formally anyway.
I'm curious too. So you grew up being very creative and even wanting to become an actress, and then somehow you ended up becoming a psychotherapist at some point. How did that transition happen?
Yes. So I was an actress, and I met my husband, and when we were, going to be getting married, I just knew how unfriendly that business is to successful relationships. So, going on the road and doing summer stock and a tour and this and that and whatever, I just felt like after I was married for a couple years that I needed to do something that kept me around more. So actually my first step into the human services was as an interpreter for the deaf. So that was also very creative. And I did a music and sign project that I sent to a couple of big bands, whatever you want to say, to U2, crazy, and to Sting. I had the same booking agent as Sting, believe it or not, because I was still doing some acting, whatever, and those things didn't pan out. But now we see interpreters at concerts, and so there were some plays I put together. A very, such a wonderful, he's no longer with us, Carl Chapinski, sign interpreter for the New Jersey Shakespeare Festival. And I can't remember which show he did, but he did so many shows on Broadway. And so he taught me a lot about signing to music. So I did that, but developed a problem with my arm with repetitive motion. 6 hours in school every day, 3 minutes between class, 20-minute lunch. Now they have interpreters, spell each other, like every 20 minutes or so. But that got me into the human services. And then it was my own therapy that I said, gee, maybe I could do this. I think this would be kind of interesting. So, and it was very creative, the therapy. My therapist was a psychoanalyst, like David, who, when he did his, he did a talk recently on processing. And he started out with his beginnings with his analyst and looking at the crack on the ceiling, so I was probably brain spotting back then, but she did something called Pesso Boyden system psychomotor therapy, which was a very creative way of working. Al and Diane Boyden Pesso were Martha Graham dancers, and they started doing some exercises that they felt like when they watched dancers, even though it was choreographed, they were all doing the same movements. There was always variation in the movement. And when they controlled for some of those features, they found that the extraneous moment always had emotional meaning. And so then they created a system that is putting voices out and figures out from our internal world, maybe the critical aspects of your mother and then the loved aspects of your mother, to make places for the different feelings. So I loved all of that. And then I did my EMDR training, met David Grand, and so that was before Brainspotting. That was in '98. So that's going to be part of this story too, with some of your questions. So I'm going to hold that piece off.
My next question was to ask you, how did creativity and brain spotting intersect for you?
Here's a great question. And one thing I didn't say was I got my master's in drama therapy, so using role, in therapy. Anyway, when I went to my EMDR training, David Grand, there were a couple of things that he did right away. Those people that know me are going to be like, I've heard this story a million times. But those who haven't, okay, here we go. Here's the story. So, those rapid eye movements, I was like, with my partner, like I just couldn't take it. And he was facilitating. He wasn't a trainer. He was a facilitator. So he came over and he said to my practicum partner, just move really slowly and get the pacing from her, And I was like, oh, that's good. I can do this now. I'm like, that was good. I knew my partner well. We were in a hypnotherapy training concurrently together, and she had a lot of developmental trauma. So I started this slow thing with her, and she started with, she couldn't even do the eye movements. So here came David again, and he said, if it's okay with her, take her hands and get the pressure, how much or how little, and the pacing of it, how fast or how slow. And so my friend, my colleague, was able to do the EMDR practicum. And I'm like, he is, very adaptable, creative, whatever. And then I ended up in his session for performance issues, and I was picked. So I had been fired when I was still acting before I met my husband from what became the last touring company of the National Lampoon. So this was supposed to be my big break. They were all, and they made me anyway nervous. They were always talking about Gilda and Chevy and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, would you just shut up and let us do our work? But it was an era where the material really just, it was not funny. It was that year that they were making Animal House. And if you think of what Animal House was, it's a lot of frat bros. And what are the roles for the women? Sitting on a counter, in the kitchen, and somebody tickling them. That's not my kind of comedy. I was more all the different characters, all the different, roles. And so they fired me, and they farmed my material out to all the other actors. Nothing stuck but one, and it went to a man. And then 1 month into the tour, the whole tour folded, never to see the light of day again. But I carried that around like, I guess I'm not up to the bar, I'm not. And I was in my late 20s then. And I carried this around for like 20 years. So when I met David in my late 40s and did this piece of work, finally, it came together, it meshed for me, that processing and that ability to update my hippocampus, that those things that I just said about the tour, the Animal House, the era that it was, all of that finally clicked in, and I said, it was just something that happened. And then it came in like, oh, Katharine Hepburn was fired from something, and this one was fired. And something just fell away that I had carried around even when I left the business. So that it wasn't Brainspotting yet, but it was David's orientation that led to the discovery of Brainspotting. So I said to him, I think that I didn't even realize what his name was that day, because all these different people with their specialties and the trainings, whatever, were in this big elevator at FIT, Fashion Technology Institute in New York. We're all in this big elevator ready to go home. I'm in one corner, he's in the other. And I said, I'm calling you. And he said to me, a lot of people would say that to me, but I knew that you would do that. And I did. And there I was, and here I am now. So it's been a huge part of my getting released from the trauma of what showbiz can be, and being able to flow back into my creative self and trusting more my funny self, and how that kind of connects in my life, because you can take the actress out of the business, but you can't take the actress out of the person, so.
Was there kind of an aha moment for you where creativity and Brainspotting came together, or maybe not?
I think probably it was more with that natural flow that just sort of naturally flowed into one day, him saying, okay, I'm going to do this thing in your session where I'm going along and I'm going to notice something with you, and then I'm going to stop, and you'll see how that is. And I said, oh my God, that was amazing. And he said, well, now try that with your clients. So that was my phase one. That's another story a lot of people will have heard. But, and then all my clients were like, I want to do this now. I don't want to do what we were doing before. So that pushed my creativity with how I do, psychotherapy with this new thing, and seeing what was coming from people. And I did have a group that it was removing blocks to creativity, and I had artists and actors and musicians and whatever, writers in the group. And I think that was as Brainspotting was coming along. So my own work, my own personal work, I felt really informed how I worked with the group and then with each person. That it was more, rather I think, than a real aha moment. That was really back in when I learned EMDR, but it was with David doing something very different with EMDR for sure, so.
What role do you think creativity plays in the
healing journey? Oh, I think huge. This is where folks I know that are artists of one kind or another, or anyone who their particular kind of creativity, if they aren't using that talent, it's almost like it works on you in a negative way. If you aren't funneling that somehow it seems to, for me anyway, dampen and block. And I find this with some of my clients too. I have some clients, a musician who, when they're not doing their, whether writing some music or playing their instrument or whatever it is, I always notice in those periods of time, there's more struggles. Even to just do something in their house, and not be doing a performance or rehearsing a piece or a show or whatever it might be. And I remember this too, just from back when, when I was an actress, the whole thing for actors was, after you finished like a wonderful run of a show or whatever, it was like, will I ever work again? And while you're doing that show, you're not feeling that or thinking that, even as you're coming to the end of the show, and all of a sudden, and my mother used to say to me, when I was younger, before I was married, she'd say to me, "Oh, Debbie, you always say this, you'll work, you'll work again." And I'm like, "Oh, Mom, you say you're my mama, you're my mom, you have to say that," But I think that we all need something creative, whether it's something we already do or something that we've thought about. It makes me think of expansion, that little pilot light of, I've always wanted to learn a language, or I've always wanted to, I paint and dabble, but I've always wanted to take a watercolor class, and to find the time to be able to do that for yourself. It just seems to open something up that really has a global effect on other things in your life when you allow that expression and the movement of your creativity and your edge with that of, you may take a class and it's like, I can't do that thing well yet, but you keep at it and keep it at it, and then you go, oh, that's looking better, or oh, that actually feels really good, or looks, good, or oh, that monologue all of a sudden went it just seamlessly, and it's such a great feeling when you make something, perform something. It's our creations are like our children, whether it's a poem or a role that you play, or you sculpt something. I've been crocheting, I've been crocheting those little woobles. They're like little animals and they have a pattern. And when I make one and I see how it comes out, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can give you away, It's like my baby now. So I think there's an element of that.
You work with a client who comes to you, inquire about it. They're like, I've never been creative. That's not me.
That's a good question. I don't always inquire of folks, and I feel like I know that I should. If they tell me, that there's something they do or they used to do or whatever, my pilot lights go on for, what is this and how is this for them, and try to find a way to see whether sometimes we've brain spotted on all the things that get in the way of their finding time to do that, or just whatever it is that they're in a low place and they don't feel they have that. It's not even the blank page, it's the I don't have the oomph inside me to do it. And so sometimes then we do a lot of work on just right where they are. And David's talking so much about the hypo functioning right now, about what, and then it's interesting because invariably something happens where they'll come back and they'll say, well, I've written a few things, or I actually sat down at the piano this weekend, and so I think, sometimes just working right where they are rather than on the thing that they're blocked from. Although sometimes the thing they're blocked from and they want to go in there, of course, then I would go in there. But it's that dance again of the relationship and I think the creativity of what relationship is with your client, and the feeling of the dance that you're going to do with them that day, and just keeping, it's almost like, well, I keep that place open in me that you are a pianist, you are a writer, you are a musician. You may not be doing it right now, but that doesn't mean that you're not that type of creative arts. So
I believe a kind of space, or maybe you don't know what they are, but they're creative and you're holding that space.
yes.
Our limbic system communicates that.
Yes.
So I was thinking about, I can't even remember how long we've known each other now, but I know it's only sort of recently, maybe 2 or 3 years, that I've known that you are a poet among your other.
Oh, yeah. Yes. That's interesting, because when you ask that question, it's like, when do we discover that about each other? I remember when you started telling me about your poetry, and I'm like, oh wow. And then you'd send me a piece, and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. And it made for I felt like another closeness in our relationship, and that I felt like the artist that I am and the artist that you are got, some contact to each other. So.
The reason I brought that up is I do want you to read one of the poems today to close out our interview and share your beauty with words with our listeners.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I'd love to do that. Yes, and I might say that I have an audiobook on pet loss, and how it started was I just started writing this poetry. I didn't even know if I thought it was poetry or what it was, but I ended up making an audiobook, and it followed all of the kind of phases of grief. I followed Elizabeth Harper Neal's 7 Choices model, and then my mom became very ill with cancer. She'd been 6 years from her original and was terminal. So we found out on December 6th or 5th. Look at me, I can't get the date. 8th. Not that it matters to anybody, but it matters to me that she was terminal. And so I don't know whether I wrote this in that time between then and the 19th of December when she passed, or if I wrote it afterwards, but it's one of the ones that you accepted into your wonderful Bone to Brain journal. So
If you want to see it, it's in
great, thanks. So it's titled, Now I'm One of Those People. Now I'm one of those people. Joined the ranks, but didn't sign up. Life sentence, bereaved because of death. Dead. Ridiculous, inflexible state. Now I'm one of those people whose mother died at Christmas. Made for TV movie, Elizabeth Moss is me, special appearance by Meryl Streep, actor's studio version of my mom. Tragic, poignant. And now I'm one of those people crying at hymns in church, 2 pocket packs of Kleenex, catching the waterfall, Hoover Dam tears, monsoon season in the church pew. So I'm one of those people, wistfully, jealously watching moms and daughters together, young moms with babies, middle-aged moms tolerating teenagers, elder moms shored up by adult daughters. I'm one of those people enduring. She's no longer suffering. She'd want you to be happy. It's the normal order of things, a mother before her daughter. Time heals. How's your dad doing? You have wonderful memories. The ignorant, well-meaning. Please stop trying to stop my grief. Needing to just be with the moments when quoth my inner raven, nevermore. That's nothing.
for sharing with us, being here today, and also for sharing that really special poem.
Yeah. Thanks for having me do that one, because I think I read I wrote a bunch of things after my mom died, and I had some friends over and I did a little whole like ritual and ceremony, and then I read some of the poems, but that would have been 2002. So I haven't read that since 2002. My mom died in 2001. So,
You read it beautifully. You read it beautifully with a lot of feeling. Thank you so much.
thank you. Sure. Of course.